Authorities going door to door in Australia hunting for clues in the New Zealand massacre. And some people try to point the finger at President Trump.
They say, oh my goodness, it must somehow be the president's fault. Speaks to a politicization of everything.
The black boxes from an Ethiopian Airlines flight that crashed last week shows, quote, clear similarities with the crash of the same type of plane in Indonesia last October.
Levees breached and widespread evacuations as Nebraska sees its worst flooding in 50 years. Rivers are at historic levels and have forced hundreds from their homes.
Representative Omar, why do you think people in your own party reacted so strongly against what you said?
I think Islamophobia is very much among the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party.
Joe Biden's slip-up hints at a presidential run.
I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the anybody who would run.
68 teams, but only one national title. It is time to fill out your March Madness brackets.
Thanks to the earth and the climate, because it's actually going to feel like spring, 50 plus degrees.
You're thinking the climate.
I'm thinking the climate in general.
I'm so ready for some warmth. I am so tired of being cold, guys. I got to tell you, I am ready for some spring clothes. I'm ready for some sunshine. Bring it on.
Okay.
Listen, Jedediah is going to be with us all week.
All week.
Ainsley's off. It's great to have you.
Yeah, troublemaker in the house.
Right, at least 3 hours. Meanwhile, right to a Fox News alert, overnight police raiding homes in Australia. Yes, we know this in connection to the horrific attacks on 2 New Zealand mosques on Thursday night.
The international investigation intensifying as the death toll rises to 50.
Aisha Hosni joins us right now with the surprising move the suspected attacker made. Aisha?
Yes, that is right. Listen to this. A New Zealand paper now reporting the suspect has now fired his lawyer and wants to represent himself in court. And that attorney, former attorney, says he appears to be lucid and was not mentally unstable when making this decision. This follows the police commissioner of New Zealand confirming there is only one suspect here who carried out the mass shootings at 2 mosques in Christchurch. But he did stress that does not mean there weren't possibly some other people out there supporting him in some other way. Australian police are conducting raids on homes, one of them reportedly belonging to the suspect's sister. Meanwhile, New Zealand's Prime Minister announcing gun law reforms will be announced in about 10 days.
I've already made clear that a number of New Zealanders question the availability of military-style semi-automatic weapons in New Zealand. However, I will be giving a more fulsome set of details once we've worked through the in-principle decision that Cabinet has made.
And a Christchurch gun shop owner also just admitted that he was the one who sold the suspect 4 guns and ammo legally and didn't notice any red flags about that man. Steve, Brian, Jedediah.
All right, Aisha, we thank you very much for the live report. As we told you last week when we were covering this massacre live, the guy had a manifesto out there, and it was very clear he is a white supremacist. It's interesting now, though, that he wants to fire his attorney, because clearly he probably wants to spout some of the things in his manifesto out in open court in New Zealand.
Yep. That's exactly right. And many Democrats jumping in on that, of course, because in the manifesto, it seemed in some parts that this guy was praising Donald Trump. Of course, I don't pay a lot of credence to what lunatics say in manifestos, but some on the left felt a little differently. Take a listen to what the media and Democrats had to say about Trump and the New Zealand attack.
The president uses language often that's very similar to the language used by these bigots and racists.
I don't think moderate Republicans are doing enough to hold President Trump accountable for his rhetoric.
Many of these people have cited Donald Trump along the way. So to me, that means, at the very least, he is dividing people.
This is a president who has given plenty of rhetorical ammunition, I think, to terrorists like this.
That the president had this opportunity to once again denounce white nationalism. He didn't do that.
No one is blaming the president. To what extent does the president have to take this concern seriously and modify the way he talks about issues like this?
Okay, so it all started with the man who appears to be a white supremacist in New Zealand, and then somehow it has, Brian, been imported here.
Every time somebody like this commits a crime like that and then lists somebody there, I don't really think you should be, if they put Barack Obama's name in the manifesto, I would think it would be unfair to put Barack Obama on the griddle and say his policies during his years, or Clinton or Bush. I just don't think that it's possible to, in one category, say he's a lunatic, he's nuts, he's a cold-blooded killer. At the same time, just go, well, if it wasn't for such and such as language and verbiage, it wouldn't have happened. Mick Mulvaney came loaded for bear at two separate Sunday shows. And I want to make it clear, you cannot equate the two.
There's folks who just don't like the president, and everything that goes wrong, they're going to look for a way to tie that to the president. That's just absurd to say that there's some type of connection between being against illegal immigration, which is what the veto was about, for legal immigration, and the ruthless live streaming of murder of 15 people. The two things have nothing to do with each other. To simply ask the question every time something like this happens overseas, or even domestically, to say, oh my goodness, it must somehow be the president's fault, speaks to a politicization of everything that I think is undermining sort of the institutions that we have in the country today.
And what he's referring to is the word invasion. So the president, while he's in the behind the desk, the Resolute desk, he's talking, and he's talking about immigration, and he says it's an invasion because over 1 million people are supposed to come in the southern border. And they say, well, why is he using the same language as that 28-year-old killer in New Zealand? He's not using the same language. That's the way Trump talks to illustrate what he sees as a problem at the border. Nothing to do with gun control in New Zealand.
And this media language, by the way, I gotta love Stephanopoulos. He's like, oh, we're not blaming Trump. He has to say that as a preface, but then he follows it up, and they all follow it up. But let's examine Trump's language. No, that is a suggestion then that you are linking President Trump to this terrorist, which you can't do regardless of political ideology. You cannot link a maniac and the workings of a maniac to any politician, left or right. That is insane.
Mick Mulvaney made one other great point. He said, you got to figure out why these things are happening, why we do see so many of these killings. And he said, here's the quote, is there something happening in our culture where people go, you know what, I think today I'm going to go on TV and live stream me murdering people. That's what we should be talking about, not the politics of the United States. Because, as we told you last week, he went on Facebook Live for 17 minutes, and you saw him walk in there and just start killing people left and right, to the point where he said, you know what, I didn't even know where to shoot because there were so many targets.
Yep.
It was unbelievable.
Right. Meanwhile, let's change gears and talk about 2020. We saw Beto O'Rourke for the longest time. People were saying when this guy gets in, it's going to be big news, and it was. I get it. When Joe Biden jumps in, it's going to be big news, and it's about to happen. Did Joe Biden once again expose his weakness, his ability to make gaffes? And did he do it in his own run? Or was this on purpose? Oh. Listen to his remarks in Delaware over the weekend.
Folks, I know I get criticized. I'm told I get criticized by the new left. I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the United States, if anybody who would run. I didn't mean. But anybody who would run.
He never lets you down. We
He
love
doesn't.
Joe Biden.
Well, what do you think? Do you think he did that on purpose?
No, it was an accident.
That's
But
Joe being Joe.
Look, it's the game they're playing right now. Everybody knows he's going to run. But for a variety of reasons, he's going to do it in a couple of weeks. And so he's just leading up to that. What's interesting is there's a brand new poll out from Emerson Polling. They talked to the people in Wisconsin. And with this gigantic crop of new faces, look at this. Look at the top two people. Bernie Sanders right now, among Democratic voters, has 40% of the vote. Joe Biden has a quarter. Between the two of them, they have 63%. And these are people who have been in the arena before. It's not the new batch. It's the old batch that's way ahead right now.
Isn't that going to be interesting, too? Where does Joe Biden fit into this kind of crazy left wing? I mean, when you have Bernie Sanders rising to the top, and I've interviewed both of them. I've interviewed Biden and Sanders, and they're very different. Biden is very measured. He listens. Oh, it's drastic. It's drastic. But I'm curious whether Biden is going to like Bernify himself a little bit, and he's going to want to pull aspects of Bernie. Yeah, Bernie. I mean, maybe you never know. But I'm curious to see how this all plays out. The media, of course, was hyping Joe Biden, dropping this hint. Take a listen to what they had to say.
2020 may be more than just a possibility.
He keeps leaving these Easter eggs and dropping these hints about whether or not he may run.
We should be treating him as a presidential candidate that just hasn't filed the papers yet.
All signs are now that he wants to get into this race, and he comes in with a lot of advantages.
That state, by the way, Wisconsin, is a state in which Biden does the strongest over Donald Trump, and the president's got to win Wisconsin to win again. The matchup is also one outside the margin of error with Sanders and Warren both lead Trump 52-48. Harris and Klobuchar are tied with him, but it's so early, within the margin of error. But it's those 7 states. People are going to be looking at, don't look at 50. It's going to come down to 7 states and who does the best there. And will the Democrats pick the best person to win those 7 states, or will they just see who the survivor is, not who the best matchup is?
And will the media establishment, will their choice be the same as the Democratic voters? Because I have a feeling the media establishment's going to push for Biden, thinking, oh, he's more electable, he has the experience, he's part of the Obama ticket, they can use all that legacy that they like. Some of us don't like it so much.
But you know what?
And then there's going to be Bernie on the other side.
I think you're probably right. But I also think Joe Biden has been kicking himself because he did not run last time. He had he said when his son died, his heart wasn't in it, and he's been looking ever since, and he'd gone, you know what, I could have won.
Yeah.
Joe Biden is saying to himself.
Also, David Plouffe is with Beto O'Rourke. David Plouffe, a major Obama strategist. Why would you not stay back and see if you really want Biden?
Especially
I
if
think
Beto's
so.
going to be
The Obama people don't want Biden. That's what I think the big story is.
That's a big take. Let us know, though. Friends at FoxNews.com. I want to know what you think. Do you think Biden's going to be the guy to beat? Is Bernie going to be the guy to beat? Tell us what you think.
All right. It says Carly Shimkus is doing it. Is this true?
Did you just say Carly Shimkus is the one to beat? I
in the
agree with you
house.
there.
It's you.
Good morning, guys. How are you? All right, let's get to extreme weather right now. Hundreds forced from their homes as fierce flooding pounds the Midwest. Crews rescuing nearly 300 people from washed-out neighborhoods in Nebraska. Floodwaters have overcome 1/3 of the Offutt Air Force Base, damaging 60 buildings. Record flooding already recorded in 17 areas, and it is expected to get worse. The Missouri River is set to crest at nearly 48 feet tomorrow. Early evidence shows clear similarities between 2 deadly plane crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX 8 jets. Ethiopian officials say black box data from last week's crash that killed 57 people is reminiscent of the Lion Air disaster that killed 189 people. In both, pilots struggled to control the plane and tried to return to the airport. President Trump is pushing General Motors to reopen its closed Ohio plant that left 1,700 people without a job. After speaking to CEO Mary Barra, the president tweeting, "I asked her to sell it or do something quickly. She blamed the United Automobile Workers Union. I don't care. I just want it open." GM responding in a statement, quote, "To be clear, the ultimate future of the unallocated plants will be resolved between GM and the UAW." And those guys are your headlines.
That's right.
Thanks, Carly.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that a little bit later. All right. Thanks, Carly. 13 minutes after the hour.
Democrats say paying for the border wall isn't worth it, but our next guest says it's peanuts compared to the real cost of illegal immigration. Stick around for the numbers from Betsy McCoy coming up next.
Plus, driver tests out his Tesla autopilot using his wife as a guinea pig.
No.
So what happened? We'll let you know.
President Trump fighting to get money for his border wall while Democrats bash it as ineffective and expensive. Well, our next guest, writing a new op-ed in the New York Post, says we can't afford not to build the wall, arguing the investment is peanuts compared to what the real cost is of illegal immigration in the United States. Here to break down those costs, Betsy McCoy, former lieutenant governor of the great state of New York. Good morning to you, Betsy.
Good morning. That's right. Politicians are not leveling with us about what we're already being forced to spend to shelter the illegal immigrants coming across the southern border, most of them falsely claiming to be asylum seekers. The numbers are staggering. In fact, so staggering that deterring this crossing, this asylum scam, would more than pay for the wall in less than 2 years. No other public infrastructure project would get paid back so fast.
In 2 years. Let's look at some of the numbers. First of all, we know that the president has requested $8.6 billion to build the wall. That's short of the total cost. But then when you look at the next number, the number of illegal crossings in February was 76,000. And then, and this is a head scratcher right here, the cost of sheltering each unaccompanied teenager is, and I didn't realize it was this high, $775 per day. And I think that is at the Homestead Air Force Base facility down in Florida.
That's right. And the Department of Health and Human Services is operating 130 of these shelters around the country. Some are less expensive, but they're all very expensive. And the fact is that if you add up the costs, we've got $3 billion a year spent last year housing families and single adults, plus about $2.5 billion housing the unaccompanied teens. So you're up toward $5 billion, right? $5 billion before the surge. As you pointed out, 76,000 migrants in February compared with 463,000 for all of last year. So we could be here seeing 1 million migrants, double last year's numbers.
But Betsy, you know that it wasn't until Donald Trump became president that anybody ever said a wall doesn't work. Now, you know, many on the right have said they are trying to deny the president a win.
That's right. The Democrats and many Republicans, 25 in Congress, voted against the emergency declaration. But when you look at what taxpayers are being forced to spend to house these fake asylum seekers, it's staggering. And the president, believe it or not, actually cares about taxpayers. Right on his budget, it says putting taxpayers first, and he's doing it by trying to stop this unnecessary expense. And I have to say, when I look at his Remain in Mexico program, many people have not heard about this yet. He's going to make Mexico the waiting room for these
as people wait for
asylum
their
seekers.
And some will be granted asylum, but we've heard a
very
majority
small, 7.5% of people from Honduras, for example, 11% of people from Guatemala. Most of them are not legitimate asylum seekers. But kudos to the president for finding a way to save taxpayers from being literally clobbered with this expense.
Betsy McCoy, thanks for giving us those numbers. All right. Meanwhile, should you have to prove you're a citizen before you vote? Seems like a no-brainer, right? Wrong. Big case headed to court today. And it's March Madness 2020 edition. We're breaking down the brackets for the Democratic contenders. Next.
Fox and Friends is brought to you by Purdue University Global.
Purdue University Global. There's no limit to what you can achieve. And now, there's no limit to how.
Welcome back. Some quick headlines for you on big cases on the docket today. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments in a Virginia gerrymandering case. Republican leaders there want the justices to overturn a lower court ruling that found 11 districts were racially gerrymandered. The GOP has a tight 51-49 majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. And a federal appeals court will weigh a proof of citizenship voting law in Kansas. It was blocked in 2016. It required people to provide documents showing they are an American citizen before registering to vote. Back over to you, Brian.
You're going to love this. New York, we're going to do some bracketology, political style. New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand officially jumping into the already crowded field of Democratic 2020 candidates. She went from exploratory to actually in. And now that March is underway, we decide to stack up the candidates like it is a NCAA tournament one-on-one. Former Trump campaign pollster Jim McLaughlin's here with some matchups. You ready, Jim?
Yes.
All right, you looked at some of the matchups, so let's get started. First off, Kirsten Gillibrand, who will officially declare she's going to run in front of Trump Tower against businessman from New York, Andrew Yang.
Yep. She's trying to run as the female candidate. She actually attacked Beto O'Rourke last week for basically being a white male. And then you have somebody like Andrew Yang, where most people are probably saying, Andrew who? He's a businessman, but he's got money, and he's looking to appeal to that outsider, that left-wing voter that in the Democratic primary.
She's been exploring her for a few weeks. I didn't see any gain, and she continues to flip-flop. She ran as a conservative Democrat. Now she's liberal, so you have to wonder what she stands for. Let's talk about Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar. Over the weekend, Klobuchar made it clear she wasn't born to run like Beto O'Rourke claimed to at that Vanity Fair article.
It's interesting. Beto O'Rourke is basically in single digits in the Democratic primary. You know, you have Sanders and Biden as the front runners, yet Klobuchar, Gillibrand, they all attacked him. So you can see the fear there. And there's a lot of Democrats that say he's, in a lot of ways, he's the heir to Barack Obama.
Well, because especially with David Plouffe as his guy, the question is, with all his confidence, will he listen to some coaching? Let's take this matchup here. Julian Castro, who's got some Obama executive level experience with the Obama White House, and Elizabeth Warren. We know about her hiccups, but she's been indefatigable from day one, the first one in.
Yep, she probably should have run 4 years ago, because I think she could have beaten Hillary Clinton there. She's the one kind of in the Democratic polls right now. She's running third to Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. So she's got a little bit of momentum, but she has definitely had her missteps with the announcement and whatnot.
With her announcement, I'm going to get me a beer,
Yep.
but with taking on those the .coms and the social media, I think that some people can relate to that. Now, Jay Inslee, governor of Washington, against John Delaney. He calls himself a moderate Democrat. With Inslee, he wants the environmental.
Yep.
All about environment.
With Inslee, it's all about the environment. He was kind of Green New Deal before there was a Green New Deal. And a lot of people, again, are saying John who? But he was the first one to actually announce. And again, he's a businessman. He's trying to run as a moderate. His big opponent is going to be somebody like Joe Biden, who's trying to be that establishment Democrat.
And this governor put a carbon tax on this platform and couldn't even pass it in Washington. Let's move ahead now and talk about Governor John Hickenlooper. I don't think I'm a capitalist, but I am, but just don't tell anybody. Against Cory Booker. He's a happy-go-lucky campaigner.
Yep. 1 second he's saying he's going to bring people together. He wants to run with civility, but then all he does is attack Donald Trump. I think Cory Booker is one of those guys. He's really running for vice president as opposed to actually running for president.
That's interesting. And he's somebody who came in and listened for a year and then asserted himself. Kamala Harris against Tulsi Gabbard. Gabbard, of course, from Hawaii, congresswoman who served in the military, seems to have a trouble condemning Assad. That stands out. Kamala Harris, the best rollout, maybe the kind of speech with the biggest crowd. But since then, a lot of flip-flops.
Yep. And you know what? I think these are two real underdogs here that have a real shot. If you ask me today, I think Kamala Harris fits the mold of who the Democratic primary voters are looking for. But again, she's a former prosecutor. She's backtracked on her record as a prosecutor. That used to be a positive in a primary for president.
Seems like she just goes with what's popular. We don't know what she stands for, but what she does is has a lot of talent. And here are the final. Okay, there it is. Here we go. Turn around. These are the picks. Who advances and who doesn't. Let's go downstairs. Well, actually, let's just see who won. So you have on the other side.
You got Bernie Sanders and you have they have Joe Biden coming out on top.
All right. Tomorrow we're going to look at more matchups as we see who's gained. So in particular, a lot of excitement on each side, but it's so early. The first debate comes in June.
It is so early, and who's going to be the candidate? Like Donald Trump. The day he came down on that escalator, he dominated the primary. We haven't seen that from the Democrats this time.
I know. There's no early lead, except maybe Bernie Sanders, perhaps, because he's the most well-known. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Back tomorrow. We'll talk about it again. How to avoid ICE for kids, the comic book. I'm not kidding. From getting away from the feds. And it's the part of my exclusive with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. We got on our feet. We walked around. He gave me a brief tour behind the scenes at the State Department. Don't move.
The police is sworn in as a junior officer on his 5th birthday.
Look at that right there, Santa Ana. Police caught word that little Ewan wants to be an officer when he grows up, so they stopped by his birthday bash, and what do? They swore him in.
Nice. The boys in blue also bringing some soccer balls as presents. Always a good idea.
Now, I would imagine this was just ceremonial. I don't know that he's an actual police officer.
He's a hero in the making.
There you go.
I don't know. Is there a shift after school? Is there an after-school cop shift?
There's an after-school special.
I know that.
That's over on CBS.
So last week I had a chance, I think on Thursday, to go to interview the Secretary of State, and at which time we went a little long. We were supposed to have a more extensive walkthrough, but he says, hey, let's go, let me just show you a few of the paintings on this floor at the State Department, which was privately financed and redone in the 1980s. So here's a look at my walk-around with the Secretary of State.
Where am I now? So you're in the treaty room, headed to the center, and it's got this beautiful artwork, space that was restored with private funds. You got Secretary Rice, a lot of history here, Secretary Powell, and Secretary Schultz, who did fantastic work back in the 1980s for President Reagan.
And still going strong at almost 100.
It's quite a story. I hope I make it that long, too.
Have you had a chance to take an exhale and think to yourself, I'm going to be on this wall one day?
I have, and it's humbling.
You have James Madison over there, and the more you read about him, the more you understand what a genius he was.
Yeah.
Let alone as president, what he did.
Yeah, the work that Federalist Papers had, it's all amazing stuff these folks did.
Right.
And the media environment was very different too.
Right. But they were hostile.
We've always had a robust First Amendment and freedom of the press, and we've all been beneficiaries of that.
I can tell you, diplomat. You're a diplomat these days. Robust. That's a good word. And you got Jefferson. I think he was somewhat accomplished. Secretary of State, Vice President, President. Yeah. With West Point and Harvard, I know they slipped in some history, and of course, in West Point, it is a living, breathing history. What do you think of this former Secretary of State turned Vice President?
I tell you what, it's pretty remarkable. You think back to these times. I was reminded that he had a staff of about 7 or 8. And I had my team come and say, I wonder what that government shutdown looked like when you have 7 people.
Right.
Amazing leader, incredibly creative, smart, and left a legacy that we're all still benefiting from.
Oh, look at that. So, yeah, it's up to every Secretary of State. They get their painting. They're remarkably accurate, but they have not done Hillary Clinton. They have not done Tillerson, because I guess you needed to take a quick, you had to be a little quicker. He was in and out really quick. Yeah. And then I guess Mike Pompeo to be all caught up.
Why haven't they done Hillary Clinton yet?
I don't know.
Because
I don't know.
Her portrait is in the White House, actually.
They know.
As First Lady.
They know as First Lady. They wanted a different type of portrait in the White House.
Good job.
Pretty amazing. Good job, Brian.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
All right. Meanwhile, 24 minutes before the top of the hour, Carly Shimkus is in today for Jillian.
Right. Yes, and I have some headlines for you. Get a load of this story. A North Carolina man accused of murdering his wife is arrested in Arizona, 34 miles away from the Mexican border. Police say Rexford Lynn Neal had a large amount of cash on him when he was stopped near Tucson. His wife Diane's body was found along a road near their home earlier this month. This case has prompted police to look back into the death of Neal's first wife, originally ruled an accident. A new warning for parents about so-called virtual kidnappings. California police are investigating after scammers called parents claiming their daughters were abducted. They demanded money be transferred into a Mexican bank account to get their children back. In both cases, the ransom was paid before the parents found out their kids were safe the entire time. Immigration activists in Sacramento roll out 2 new publications to teach undocumented immigrants how to deal with ICE.
I want the community to actually make sure that Americans feel safe, whether you're a citizen or a non-citizen.
One of the publications is a comic book to teach kids how to protect their parents who are here illegally, how to deal with law enforcement. And a YouTube tech blogger uses his wife as a guinea pig to test Tesla's autopilot and nearly, get this, runs her over.
Now, we're gonna test autopilot. Okay, it brakes.
Yeah, she kind of had to pick up the pace towards the end there. His brave wife standing in the road as he drives at her going up to 35 miles per hour. The man fending off criticism, saying his wife was never at risk. But I'm sure he is in the doghouse.
Oh, yeah.
But Carl, the thing is, the president's saying over the weekend, the stories come out, he is not for these either am I, by the way.
Neither am I.
He's not for the self-driving cars. He does not believe in them. He's telling the Tesla guy, I'm not into it. Don't tell me about your advances. People want to drive.
Yes.
I've got one of those cars that is semi-autonomous. You can put it in and it keeps you between the stripes.
Yeah. No.
It's a little scary.
No. Too scary. And plus, we don't need the takeover of the machines, people.
No. Meanwhile, Janice Dean is out in the streets where people are
look at this.
In attendance, a big crowd.
Wow.
It's like Christmas season.
In the morning. Are you guys in the right address? Yes? All right. You're excited to be on Fox and Friends. Do I have a birthday? Get over here, birthday boy. What's your name?
Michael.
And where are you from?
Houston, Texas.
Welcome. I've got a birthday over here, too. Hello, lady. What's your name?
I'm Hannah.
And where are you from?
St. Louis.
Very nice. Celebrating with Fox and Friends. Hello, East Gators from Texas. Rita and Ed, I love it. Let's take a look at the maps. I love it when we have this many people up with me at 6:30. It's 33 here in New York, but you know what? We're going to see a warm-up later this week. Big news this week across the Midwest where we have incredible flooding over Nebraska and Iowa. I know you guys have been following this story. Flash flood warnings in effect, and all of this flooding is going to go downstream downstream into parts of the Missouri River Valley and then the Mississippi River Valley. It's going to be a story we're going to be covering for many weeks. Record levels across portions of Nebraska. Future radar shows a little system moving into the region. We're not going to see a lot of heavy rain, but any more rainfall is not good news. The rest of the country looks pretty good. It's going to be 47 in New York. All right, wave to Steve and Jedediah and Brian.
Thanks, everybody.
Yay!
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, JD.
Thanks.
All right.
Well, you thought an aspirin a day could keep a heart attack away?
Right.
You got to think again.
What?
The brand new guidelines are out this morning.
Plus, some 2020 Democrats are pushing socialist policies, but our next guest says there are just 9 steps from freedom to socialism. What are they? Stay tuned.
Good morning. Some quick headlines to get to. Health organizations no longer recommending daily low-dose aspirin to prevent heart attacks. A new report saying the benefits for older, healthy Americans aren't worth the risk of internal bleeding. The pain reliever can still be a lifesaver for those with past heart issues, however. And listen to this. The creator of the Jelly Belly jelly bean is going to pot. David Klein launching a line of jelly beans infused with CBD, a marijuana extract. The 38 flavors include toasted marshmallow, strawberry cheesecake, cinnamon, and spicy licorice. Klein says he's convinced his CBD jelly beans will, quote, help the world. That is a lofty goal. Steve?
Okay. Thanks, Carly, for that update. Meanwhile, it's a race to the left for Democrats heading into 2020 as more on the left are embracing socialistic policies.
Our next guest now sounding the alarm, writing in a new op-ed, there are just 9 steps from freedom to socialism to societal breakdown.
That writer is former chairman of the California Republican Party, Tom Del Arcaro, is joining us right now from San Francisco. Tom, good morning to you.
Hey,
Morning,
thanks
Tom.
for having me on.
Okay,
How are you?
Doing okay. We're going to go through the 9 points, and we're going to see how close we're getting to it. First of all, the first step is government spending, and we do a lot of that. And it's massive.
Yeah, we do have massive. We're going to spend $7.6 trillion as a society in this upcoming year, which is roughly 4 times what Reagan's era spent when he said government was the problem.
All right, number 2 are tax systems that reduce incentives.
Yeah, we have massive tax systems, and hallmarks of socialist societies are poor incentives where there's weak economic growth, and that comes from tax systems. Trump did a good job beginning with the business tax code. He's got to do better with personal so we have better growth.
Next step, number 3, reduced growth leading to economic stagnation, and that's something the EU's seen over the last 20 years.
Yeah, they've had zero economic growth over the last 20 years, and government is about 60-70% of their economies. In the United States, we're about 36, with regulations closer to 50. Our growth has slipped from 4 to 2 over the last 60 years. Trump's trying to revive it.
Next up, something that gives me rage, are growing deficits.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have massive government spending. There's no example in history of a big government that didn't have deficits and lots of taxes. And the United States is pushing the limit here. Greece was at 180% of the economy. We're at 106.
Okay,
in debt.
Next step, number 5, governments print money. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, no government can keep up with the spending. Taxes can't do enough, so they start printing money. This is the danger zone when that sort of thing happens. We had it once in the 70s. Venezuela has it now. They have, what, 1,000,000% inflation this year. 1 million.
Number 6, wage and price control.
Yeah, this all comes out of weak economic growth. That's the key here. If you have 0 or less growth, you're going to have stagnation. And then you start having shortages, all these problems. We had it a little bit in the 70s. In Venezuela, the stores can only be open on certain days, and you can only shop on certain days.
That's crazy. Underground economies rise. That's happening in certain spots.
Yeah, in the United States, we had a lot of this during the Carter era, but once the engine got going under Reagan, then it changed. So in Greece, it's about 25%. Here in America, it's 5 to 6%. That's a good and normal amount.
Number 8 is a big one, class warfare, which we're already seeing right now, frankly.
Yeah, and that all relates to economic growth. If people can get jobs, then they start to worry about what's on their own plate and advancing. But if they can't get jobs, they look to the others and say, well, they're doing too well. And if you have too much income gap or wealth gap, then it gets played up. That's where the real danger zone starts.
And the final step is total societal discord, which is what we're seeing right now in Venezuela. But Tom, let me ask you about this. How, in this country, you know, as you look at some of those steps towards socialism, some of them seem like we're right there. But others were a bit apart. Are we closer to this than we were 20 years ago?
We are, because spending is so much more. And if they went forward with something like Medicare for all and drove spending above 50%, then socialism starts to sound normal and comes into view. If we kill off economic growth with AOC's Green New Deal, then you're going to have this class warfare. This can be avoided. Sweden's walking away from socialism down from 70% spending to 50%. We can walk away from this, but it would be really dumb, if we did the Green New Deal or Medicare for all, because that would drive spending so high we'd have economic stagnation and back to this class warfare.
Thanks, Tom. It's funny, when I was looking at this, I was thinking about the Democratic Party platform, and I don't think their platform is going to do too well when people start realizing what the consequences of these things are. But thank you so much for your input.
Yes, definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, is going to join us live coming up.
Yep. Plus, the left is praising a teenager who egged an Australian senator after his comments about the New Zealand shooting. But don't try that egg thing with Joey Jones. Uh-oh. He'll tell you why, coming up next.
An Australian senator facing backlash after he took on a 17-year-old who threw an egg on his head. The Prime Minister of Australia suggesting he could face charges for fighting back. But our next guest has a message for anyone who attacks him.
Retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician Joey Jones joins us now. Joe, you watched this. Do you think who do you back in this scenario? Was it right for the kid to hit him with an egg? Was it right for the response?
Well, I don't back stupidity, but I understand someone's nature to defend themselves. Let me make this clear. I'm not defending this senator's comments at all. But if you walk up to someone and attack them from behind and don't expect retaliation, you're pretty stupid. Perhaps, you know, at 17 he doesn't know this. Maybe at 18 or 20 he will. Maybe that's why we don't let 17-year-olds vote in this country. His discretion or discernment just isn't there yet. But, you know, someone that's been trained in hand-to-hand combat, I can tell you, if I get attacked from behind, the first thing I'm going to do is react before I realize if that was an egg or a hammer or what it was. Right. You can see in the video, he takes a moment, a split second, and it looks like he decides to slap him instead of punch him. And I do applaud the senator on that notion. Then the 17-year-old retaliates, and then he comes back with his fist swinging. I think the people around the senator did the right thing by separating them and neutralizing the kid.
Well, you know, violence is never the answer. You hear that a lot, but this seems to have been something that was set up for social media. It looked like there were all those cameras around. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the idea that violence is never the answer, violence is never the remedy you initiate. But when someone attacks you, you defend yourself. In this country, we have the right to self-defense in most states. I don't know exactly what Australia's laws are. I'm sure the senator, obviously being the older person and the person who retaliated, it's kind of like on the football field. You only see the person that punches back, I guess. I'm not sure why people are deciding that this 17-year-old kid is a victim. He initiated the contact. Another point I'll point out is that, you know, Westboro Baptist Church protested vehemently against my brother being buried at Arlington. And had they so much as blown bubbles at us, something would have happened. We would have defended ourselves. No matter why you're protesting, right or wrong, I'm not saying the 17-year-old is on the same level as Westboro Baptist Church, but protesting is only protected so long as you don't physically harm someone. And the moment you do or attempt to, then that person has the right to defend themselves. So this was just a really stupid move by a young kid.
You know, Joey, and I agree with you. I didn't like what the senator's remarks on immigration either, but this kid has actually been glorified on Twitter. He's been called Egg Boy. I mean, you have people reaching out and saying, how can we pay for his legal fees? How can we get him to get more eggs? And there's a new trend now where this seems to be acceptable behavior. Crack somebody in the head with an egg if you disagree with them. If people on your side disagree with your policies, or maybe they didn't like what the guy said, that becomes okay. So are you concerned about normalizing violence in protests and somehow elevating people who commit acts of violence against people you disagree with?
Well, they say 1% of America serves. About 20 million veterans, so that's larger. It's about 10% of America has served. But let me tell you something. As someone in an elite fraternity who has had to defend myself and my life, I can tell you that regardless if it's our president, if it's our senators, our representatives, or our local mayors, our elected representatives have to understand that every word they say in today's world will be held against them, and people can get to them. So I think that this is an omen, or at least a cautionary tale for everyone, that spouting off at the mouth before you think, or throwing an egg at someone before you think, can result in something much worse than a bad tweet or public shaming. We have to understand that most people in this world are going to defend themselves when attacked. And you don't have the opportunity to decide, oh, that was an egg, and this is a 17-year-old.
The kid was just waiting for the response, so he knew something was coming at him. That's what he was hoping for. Joey, thanks.
And we don't know what his stance is. We don't know what he's trying to say back. All he did was throw an egg. He didn't make a point. Nobody learned from it.
Joey, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
More.
The company's